here being in college and looking for positions at companies, would you say the most important thing would be to make sure that your ethics align with the companies?
That your what?
Your ethics and values align with the companies.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't even have to ask that question because these are ethical. I mean, that's the thing that keeps these places going, and what turns other companies down and puts them out of business is a question of ethics. And I think that's why what you gave me was a good question. But I hope that this syndrome of lying will be cast out sooner or later, but I'm afraid it's not. I mean, I look at this political campaign. I mean, these are just the biggest Pinocchios I've ever seen. It's really troubling, and we seem to forgive too much. I mean, we're a very forgiving company. Firestone's still in business. They shouldn't be, but they still are, and I don't want to say untoward things towards their workers. They didn't do this. Their management did. Let's go up there where the microphone is.
If you ever get into the position where people use a cover-up, or that you get into the position where you might need one, what's the best way to deal with that?
Great question, and I'll give you a really good example. In January of 2008, a good friend of mine, Peter Karmanos, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, he founded CompuWare, which is a software company, 35 years old. Not well known, but huge in the business world. He's a billionaire. And he was trying to bring back the city of Detroit. He was a Detroit kid. And he'd gotten tight with the mayor of the city of Detroit, who was Kwame Kilpatrick. How many people have heard of Kwame Kilpatrick? Well, the day that it was announced I was coming to take over communications was the day they announced the sexting scandal between the mayor and his chief of staff. And that started the scandal in Detroit. And my boss kept supporting this mayor. And I kept telling him he cannot do this, because the evidence was coming out that not only was he cheating on his wife, he was cheating the citizens of Detroit, taking bribes. He's now in the Who Scout for 28 years, by the way. But I finally said, I can't do this anymore, because I'm not going to protect you, and I will not lie for you. So, I mean, if you're in a situation like that, you got to tell them, this is what I'm going to say. If you're not happy with that, then find somebody else. That's sometimes the only way out.
In your experience, do you feel like companies often lie because they believe that the cost of litigation or settlement would be less than the cost to repair?
That's a great question. I don't necessarily think they lie. Here's what the typical engineer does. And my brother-in-law was the head of Ford Engineering. Before that, he was the head of Chrysler Engineering. Here's what an engineer does when they find a problem. First, they try to prove that it's not really happening. Step two, okay, but it is happening. Step two, they try to put the smallest fence they can around the problem. So it's these 5,000 vehicles. It's not all 100,000 that we made last year. And then that's step two. And then step three is they go to the government and say, it's not a safety recall, okay? It's just a customer convenience recall. And you say, why are you hung up on that? They're hung up on that because the plaintiff's attorneys go after them on safety recalls worse. And they get bigger jury awards. So once again, these safety advocates, who are not advocates, they're making this situation more poisonous than it has to be. But no, primarily the companies that I work with were very honest, because they know the stakes are high if they lie. But then there's Volkswagen. That's why I'm just blown away by this Volkswagen. That is a scandal. The other ones are crisis. This is a scandal. And no one's going to die, but it's the worst scandal in the history of the auto industry. Let's go way up there. Then we'll go to you.
I know you talked a lot about the auto industry and scandals that directly affected the safety of consumers, but how do you think something more recent like the Subway scandal, where it didn't really affect the consumer safety, just the image of the brand, how do you think someone like that handles that differently than something that affects someone's safety?
Which Subway scandal? The one where the guy was peeing in the stuff, or?
No, I didn't know about that one, but that's good to know.
Oh, sorry, good. I guess I'm safe.
The dude that was liking children instead of peeing on subs. Jared.
Jared?
Yeah.
Oh boy, where do you start? You know, he got the hell beat out of him a couple days ago. And my hands are hurting. That one's so sick. I can't blame Subway for that. I can't blame Subway any more than I can blame Tylenol for the poison that the jerk in the 80s put in the Tylenol. You know, Subway survived that fine. This is just a sick individual. And we see sick individuals every once in a while. And what is Subway going to do when they say, hey, we'd like you to do ads for us, Jared? And have you been molesting any small children lately? No. So I think they've handled it well. I mean, they got rid of him right away. I'm glad they didn't stand by their man. So let's go. Let's go right there. Black shirt, left hand in the air. Wait for the mic. Wait for the mic.
What do you feel is the greatest challenge for business crisis management?
For business what?
Crisis management.
Being prepared. That's the key. And they don't want to. Because so many think a crisis isn't coming, which is rule number one they just broke. A crisis is coming. Whether you're an individual, an organization, a company, a university, but it's coming. Now, if you prepare for it, you might get it mitigated a bit. Maybe you can get it diverted completely. But you will survive unless you're a criminal organization. But companies don't get ready. Toyota, the greatest auto company in the world, they really are when you think about it. Their manufacturing systems have revolutionized the business. They're just great at everything. They were not ready for this sudden acceleration, which doesn't happen, by the way, but they weren't ready for it. And it hurt them terribly. And on top of that, they had the tsunami in Japan, so they had two tsunamis that hit them. One was not being ready for this crisis in their cars, and then a real tsunami that wiped out some facilities. But I thought of all people they would be ready. BP, the greatest oil company in the world, was not ready for the Horizon Deepwater spill. Their CEO, Tony Haywood, a week into the crisis, which killed, I think, 17 people, put businesses out of business. The well was not contained. He's quoted as saying, I just want to get my life back. Oh my God. You're making millions and millions of dollars and you want to get your life back. He doubled down on his stupidity a week later when he took his son, not in the backyard to play with a bat and ball. Of course, he's British, so they don't play bat and ball. But not to the backyard to do something of his mansion. He took him to a yacht race. A yacht race. How many people here own a yacht? It just showed how out of touch he was. And that was a nail in his coffin, and he was gone 2 days later. But BP was not ready for this crisis. So the best of the best can blow it if they're not ready.
How would you suggest to be prepared?
Can you come back with that?
How would you suggest people to be more prepared for crisis?
Great question. It's a great follow-up, because what you do is you get your top team from all disciplines in your organization and say, what are our guiding principles if we get in the crapper? What are we going to do? What is most important to us? And you remember what I said in Ford, safety of our customers, getting new tires, communicating honestly and openly, protecting Firestone. Nothing about lawsuits, nothing about financial, because if you put any of those above those, you're gonna put the customer far down the line. And that's it. You don't need to spend $5 million with some firm out there that says they can get you ready for a crisis. You can get ready for a crisis on your own, and you drill it down. Once you agree on your guiding principles, you drill it down to everybody in your organization, saying this is how we're going to act. In the auto companies, from the top CEO to our dealers, to our service people in our dealerships. Are these two books up here? Are those the same ones, or you guys already have the ones you need? Let's go up there.
So as companies become larger and larger and merge to become competitive and become interdependent, like Takata with their airbags, how do you deal with a crisis that affects multiple industries, like the 2008 crisis with the financial industry?
That was a really unique one, the financial crisis, because many of those big banks didn't want the money. Did you know that? They didn't want the money. They said, we don't want it. We can handle this on our own. But Hank Paulson demanded that they take the money. The financial industry was incredibly arrogant, and they didn't care if they had a crisis, because they knew, as they said, they were too big to fail. So I think that's an anomaly, the financial industry. All the other industries, I mean, you name me one industry where the safety and satisfaction of your customers isn't the number one priority. Because I can't. This university, the safety and satisfaction of your students is your number one priority, right? I mean, I've noodled that one because I keep talking about it in speeches. I can't think of one industry where the customer isn't the priority. Let's go right up there. Right there.
So I think we can gather from your presentation that lying is bad, but is there ever a situation where it's better to not say anything rather than be completely honest?
Well, it's never good to not be honest, first of all. Number two, there are times when you cannot speak because of legalities, whether it's a gag rule or a court order, or you don't know the facts. As I said, speak openly and honestly, only with facts, and you should share those if you're allowed to by law. But you should never speculate, and you never lie. Lying is just, in this day and age with the internet, it's just so stupid to lie because the lies come out so quick. It used to be they'd be uncovered in a day or a week or a month, or sometimes a year. But now it's 15 minutes. And I gave you the example of Hillary and her immigrant grandparents. I mean, I'm trying to think what was in her head. Why would she know that lie, knowing that you could easily tell that she was lying? It just baffles me. But honesty, we've taught that as little kids. Honesty is the best policy. And I haven't seen an example where it isn't. And again, it avoids a cover-up. With a hat.
After everything came out, do you think you still would support that action about not taking anything against Firestone? Basically, one of the rules that you guys went off of was that you weren't going to try to have any lawsuits or pass the blame off to Firestone alone. The Ford was going to absorb that. Looking back at them holding that information and not providing it up front, do you really think that was the best decision?
Yeah, I do. And I've been really questioned, grilled on that a lot. Why did you, people kept saying, why are you fighting with Firestone? I go, I don't want to. They forced us to because they were throwing us under the bus. They were saying that the vehicle was the problem. Meanwhile, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is investigating this slowly and slowly. And Firestone saying they're showing they bring out the bogus scientists. One from Ohio State that worked for the Big Three, this jerk. He came to his own conclusions masterfully that it was really the vehicle's fault. And they had another guy that came out and showed all this garbage science saying it was our fault, and then he went into a witness protection program. The media couldn't find him again. I mean, we're saying that's garbage what he has here. It took a year and 2 months for NHTSA to finally rule that it was the tire, not the vehicle. And unfortunately, it was too late for me. I mean, it was, I'm thinking 30 days before Jack and I got fired. But we were finally exonerated. And I was quoted as saying we were vilified. Big front page in the Detroit Free Press. And our head of safety was a friend of mine. She goes, NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, is really mad at you for using the word vilified. And I told them they could do something that was probably physically impossible. Let's go right here in the green. Got a book up there to the guy in the hat. Oh, you got it. Okay. Oh, you're taking them off. Okay.
You said that the industry is very forgiving, and like with Firestone, even though people died, that they were forgiven eventually. Can you think of one example where the business handled it so terribly that they weren't forgiven, and they eventually went out of business because of how they handled the crises?
Boy, that's a great question. I should have thought of that in advance. I know one, it's in the auto industry, Mitsubishi, where their trooper, Consumer Reports was doing a rollover test and really had a really rigged test. And they reported it, that this is a high propensity to roll over. And Mitsubishi, Isuzu, I'm sorry, Isuzu. And Isuzu denied it, just violently denied it. And Consumer Reports is the Bible. They're full of crap sometimes, but they're the Bible. You don't argue with the Bible. And their sales plummeted immediately, 50%. Just, and then they fell off 90%. And then the vehicle was gone. And then the company was gone in this country. Same happened with, before you guys were born, the Suzuki Sidekick, or the Samurai. It had a propensity to roll over too. It just went out of production within weeks, and you never saw it again. And I'm trying to think in other industries where they just haven't survived. Anybody here think of an industry where they haven't survived after a scandal? Because I'll get back to you on that one, but I'm sure it happens. But it's amazing how Americans in particular are such forgiving people. And we forgive people. I mean, I got to tell you, if he could legally run for president, Bill Clinton would win in a landslide. And he's a child molester. So, I mean, what's going on here? That's what we do. We're Americans. We're all frail. We screw up once in a while. But when you admit it, okay, it's all right. You broke it. Nope.
No. Oh, yeah, there we go. So during the whole Firestone thing that was happening, how did you stay motivated and positive with your team throughout the entire thing?
A scotch. I got to tell you, I have a very loving wife and a supportive family. And I knew I'd become friends with the CEO, Jack. I knew we were doing the right thing because we were putting the customer first. It got tiring a while having all the darts coming in. I mean, we have the plaintiff's attorneys coming after us because we're the deep pockets. It was considered Firestone's gone, so let's go after the big money. We had what we called the 4:30 scud every day. At 4:30 in the afternoon, there would be some charge against us coming in through a media, some variety of media. And it was usually information given to them by a plaintiff's attorney or Firestone or somebody, and it was always bogus. But we had to knock it down. We had to knock that scud down. Once in a while, the scud got through because we didn't have enough time. And the media today, they want it first, they don't want it right. And so, the laziest of all journalists are TV journalists. And they have to get it out there fast. So we'd have to knock that down, that story that just appeared the next day. But I'm serious. It was almost every day like that for 8 months that we would have to knock down a scud. And I told you the story about the test missing the pages. It's unbelievable the conceit and the deceit of some of these people out there. And it was all about money. So that's how you do it.
Sorry. What are your suggestions on how to handle this with the rest of the world when these types of crises come about? Like for Firestone example.
Well, that's great because this was a global problem. As I think you heard me mention, I said we didn't go down to Venezuela because they were going to arrest us. But the problem really started in Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, both hot climates. What made Venezuela worse was their roads are really crappy. So you have hot tires, badly made, going on really rocky roads. And so we